What an unusual time. I suppose Trent knows as much as any of us about the perils and pitfalls of life, as well as its successes and accomplishments. We're about ready to hear from longtime friends and some family of Trent's, and I'm really looking forward to it. I had plans to record my part in our beautiful church sanctuary that I know Trent dearly loves. Yet the temperature hasn't risen above freezing for a few days, and it won't happen today. What a strange time to serve as our minister during a global pandemic and a major winter cold snap. Let's attend now to our beloved Trent, for in him we have a life and a birthday to celebrate. As Rachel shared with me, Trent married his college sweetheart, Patsy, and together they raised 5 children, including the eldest twin sons, Trent and his brother Ralph being twins themselves. Trent taught school full-time and had a passion for snakes. I mean, he really likes snakes. He was the president of the Greater San Antonio Herpetological Society and later the Texas State Herpetological Society. I remember the first time we met in 2009. It was after a Sunday service at our first UU church. I had guest preached, and he came up to me and he started a conversation about my use of poetry in the sermon. We talked about how language can change the world. He was gregarious, fun-loving, very intelligent, a master teacher, and so creative. I knew it from the start. And I'm so glad to know Trent. Trent, I appreciate you, and I wish you a very happy 92nd birthday. Thanks for all you are and all you do.
I am pleased today, as Congregational President of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Antonio, to say a few words about our member, Trent Cheyney. The first thing I'd like to point out is that Trent is the longest serving member of our congregation. He joined in 1946, 75 years ago, and only a year after our church was established in 1945. He was a mere teenager when he joined. So he had already been a member quite a while when I joined in 1997. And he was retired already also from teaching. But he was married to the love of his life and soulmate, Marquet, and they were inseparable. Marquet and Trent were members of our First UU book club for a few years. Marquet always read the book. Trent did not, but that didn't stop him from being able to talk about it. One neat fact about Trent that many people did not know is that he is a herpetologist. A herpetologist, that's right, a snake expert. Trent loves snakes, knows all about them, and often handled them back in the day. The San Antonio Express News has an archived photo of him handling a snake. The one thing that most people do know about Trent, and one of my favorite things about him, is that he is a poet. He writes original poetry and often read his poems at church during our annual poetry services. He even wrote a poem for our church's 50th anniversary, 25 years ago already, entitled A Trilogy of Caring, which I would like to read as part of this tribute. A Trilogy of Caring by Trent Cheyney. Change itself is ever changing. This too is meant to be, as traditional values come to grips with new technology. The large religions of the world still share some common ground, but their emphasis on their afterlife is neither right nor sound. Too many churches are erected on the shifting sands of guilt, or embrace exclusive type dogmatics, which narrow minds have built. Too many churches teach their children by the simple act of death that the here and now is but a prelude to a life beyond this earth. But our children are not sinners, and they will never be unwitting scapegoats of salvation in a flawed theology. In a world where preachers and prophets rant about evil, hell, and sin, ours is a church where pluralism and healing can begin. You who dared to found this church on the rock of common trust made sure the earlier builders' dreams would not vanish into dust. We thank you for your Spirit's vision, which time could not abort, and this sanctuary which provides welcome, solace, and support. For ours is a church of journeyers who walk a common road, who share a common earthbound faith, who bear a common load. Though addresses have come and gone, our church remains the same. We are people where people worship as they choose in freedom's sacred name. Free to voice their own opinions, whether they please or vex, about religion, race, or lifestyle, about politics or sex. During the passing of these years, our membership has grown, and some of our former members have built a new church of their own. Our two churches now are shining lights for everyone to see. There should be little room in any church for hate or bigotry. For 50 years, we've been a haven for shared eclectic thought and shunned ecclesialatry, which the faint of faith have sought. For 50 years, we've chased a dream, and now we will not cease until the world can tolerate in friendship, justice, peace. How well we live within this world is what life is all about, that brief time between our coming in and our going out. To promote a lasting harmony in body, mind, and soul, this is religion's major challenge, and this should be our goal. Thank you, Trent, for 75 years of your membership. Your contributions have been so many, and they are all treasures. You are a friend to all, and we love you. Happy birthday.
I first met Trent when Marquet, my dear friend, found out that he was single again and was interested in dating him, and our little group of Marquet's friends insisted on meeting him at a party where we could check him out and make sure that he was worthy of our friend Marquet. And of course, we found him to be delightful, and it was a good thing we did because Marquet was already really smitten. Trent wrote me many occasional poems, including one celebrating my release from having served 3 years on the board as president-elect, president, and past president. He titled it Emancipation Sunday. He was always very, very sweet to me and always very caring of Marquet. Lucy?
Trent, we just want to wish you happy birthday. The Norton family and the Cheyney family knew each other for many, many, many years. And I remember you from the time of my childhood. I don't believe I was ever in your Sunday school class, but I did hear that you had a collection of snakes, which you brought to Sunday school and entertained the class that my brother was in. I remember hearing about that. And I just want to say that we had many happy years with you and Marquet going to the symphony and enjoying a lot of beautiful music and then going for tea afterwards. And we miss those times. Nevertheless,
Happy birthday, Trent.
Happy birthday, Trent.
We love you.
We love you.
Hey, Trent. Wanted to wish you happy Valentine's Day and a happy birthday. Vaughn and I miss being with you very much. We miss movies and going out to eat with you and even taking you to the doctors. You are a very special person, and we enjoyed your poems. Vaughn enjoyed your snake shows as a kid. You have been a really big fixture in both of our lives, and we just wanted to say that we loved you, and we hope your birthday is extra super special this year.
Rowena Rodgers wishing you a happy birthday. I first met you when the church was still on Pershing Street. Our kids were roughly the same age, so I had the privilege of watching them grow up. I remember Patsy and I waiting with church school kids for their parents to pick them up, and one of your kids tugging at your pants saying, "Dad, let's go home." Besides being a history teacher, you were also a poet. You gave me a poem when my husband died. We all remember your hobby was collecting snakes. You were always a great liberal voice making a difference in the church. Just remember, I've got 6 months on you, and I'll be 93 in July. Best wishes for a 92nd birthday celebration. Happy birthday to you, Trent.
My name is Patsy Cheyney, and I was married to Trent Cheyney on December Eve. I believe it was 1956, best I remember. He was just back from Korea, and he was still in the Army at that time, and that's why we decided to get married on Christmas Eve, because nobody knew when the Army was going to let him come home again, but we figured they'd let everybody possible out for Christmas. So we had it scheduled on Christmas Eve, and actually he was quite lucky at that time. He was supposed to come home from Korea on an earlier airplane, and it was overcrowded and they didn't let him on it, and it turned out to fall in the Sea of Japan and killed everybody on it. So he was just as glad he missed that one. And when he did make it home, I was working in San Antonio, and we were married in the Laurel Heights Methodist Church. That was the church that I attended. And he was still getting mustered out up at Fort Sill, so he'd come back every once in a while. The Unitarian Church. At that time, they didn't have their own church building, and I'd never heard of the Unitarian Church in my life. But he said that was what he belonged to, and he wasn't going to go anywhere else. And I didn't know he belonged to a church. I tried to ask him what it was. And at that time, the Unitarians rented a little bitty house. It was off Broadway. I don't remember the name of the street of it, but a couple of blocks east of Broadway. And it was just a house, and there were very few people going there, but anyway, I went with him, and we got acquainted with the church. I did. And I remember Rowena Rodgers was there. She was in charge of the nursery. Rowena and her husband, Keith, were there. And I went to some of the services, and I never could make much sense out of what they were talking about, because they have different topics for sermons. But anyway, I went and I helped Rowena out in the nursery. I can remember that. And they were just renting the house, and their lease ran out at the end of the year, and they had to move. And they moved down the street toward Broadway and rented another little building, slightly larger building there. And they were trying to save their money. And I've forgotten how long they were there, but it wasn't very many years. And all of a sudden, everybody just died of happiness because they got enough money to go out and buy property and build a church on. And furthermore, it was on the Northwest Loop, where they were expecting lots of traffic and everybody to see them when they went by, and it's close to Wonderland Mall. which was also being built. And anyway, we did eventually change and go there. And Trent went pretty regularly, but I didn't always go. I had kids at home. And when I did go, I worked in the nursery more with Rowena. It was Rowena Rodgers. And I remember, the dentist's wife, Norton, Don Norton's wife. I remember she was there too early on. And we changed ministers every year, and they only stayed for about 9 months out of every year, because that was all the church could afford to pay them at that time. We didn't have enough members. And Trent and I went, but at that time he was a faithful churchgoer, but at that time he wasn't much into raising money. And we divorced after about 20 years, and he stayed with the church at that time. And I was told later on how very active he had been. I know he was devoted to the church and never wanted to go anywhere else.
Hi, Trent. It's Sally Dunlap. Happy 92nd. I'm so glad to have known you all these years. I have a few memories I'd like to share that show what a wonderful, kind, and admirable person you are. For many years, Marquet and Kim Aikenhead and Maggie Joseph and I were in a women's group, and that's how I got to know you. Well, one time, I don't even know how many years ago, you wrote little poems and statements for each of us in the group, and you put them in little containers so each of us have something special from you. And I don't remember where mine is right now, but I've saved it all these years, and I think of you so fondly. A second memory I have shows how admirable and community involved you are and have been. You were for years dedicated to bringing air conditioning into the schools in your district, and you wrote a poem about the cool schools, and it was so funny and inspirational, and you really are an admirable man. And finally, a personal memory that shows maybe more about myself than it does about you, but when my son was 4, Brandon, we were out in the backyard and we smelled something terrible. And we walked toward the smell and we saw this big, long, black snake. And I freaked out and I thought, what can I do? And I thought, oh, Trent loves snakes. And so I called you up and I said, Trent, it's a snake. You have to come over right away. Well, it would take him 45 minutes to get here in the first place. But he reacted very kindly and patiently and said, Sally, tell me a little bit more about this snake. Is it alive? And I said, well, no. He said, well, it's not alive. Tell me about it. What does it look like? I said, well, it's black and it's long and it's in my fig tree. And he said, well, Sally, I think if it's not alive, you probably don't need to worry about it. Just calm down and it'll be okay. And I said, oh, okay. Thank you, Trent.
Hi, Trent. We're Marianne and Gary Ross. We have known you for about 20 years as members of the church. It's always been very pleasant to talk with you since you're a friendly, positive person, and you've been a very well-liked member of our church.
Hi, Trent. You may recall me. When we first met many years ago, you introduced yourself as a herpetologist, which is someone who loves snakes. And we found that to be helpful because at one point, you may recall, I called you and informed you that we had a 3 or 4 foot snake in our hallway that night. I actually called you the next morning, and I wasn't sure what it was. And so since Marianne wouldn't grab it, I sure wasn't going to. And any rate, you identified it as a Texas rat snake. But you also informed me that they're not poisonous, but they will bite you. So again, Marianne wouldn't pick it up. So I worked it into a garbage pail and then took it up to a nearby empty lot and set it free. We called it Schnavely. At any rate, you were most helpful, and we do appreciate it.
Take care.
Do take care, Trent. Bye for now.
Hello, I'm Arlis Olson, and I'm here today to wish Trent a happy birthday and to share a few fond memories. We used to get together as a couple when Marquet was still alive, and those are probably the things I remember most vividly. I always said they were the only couple I knew who I could invite over for leftovers and be perfectly comfortable. The other event I remember is one time we were going to go to Dallas for a museum event, and they got up early in the morning and they came to our house. We started out and got as far as San Marcos when I remembered I had left the tickets at home. We got up they stayed overnight. We got up the next morning and did it over again. Probably my most memorable event was when Louis took Trent's grandson for an airplane ride, and he crashed the airplane over a wild animal farm. The grandson had a broken ankle and Louis had some serious injuries. However, they were both in the hospital and they became national celebrities. They were even interviewed while they were in the hospital, because what can be more newsworthy than an airplane up in a tree and a wild tiger pen down below? Anyhow, I guess they both survived. The other thing I would say about Trent is I know he was a confirmed activist on many issues, and I used to be much more so. But whenever I went to a meeting, there would be Trent there also, regardless what it was. And I also know he used to do homilies for the church sometimes, and sometimes he brought one of his poems, which I have. It's called The Politics of Shame, and I just want to share one stanza. It says, "If we do not work for justice, we too must share the blame, for the politics of poverty is the politics of shame." And I know Trent has worked all his life for many good causes, and I wish him well and happy birthday.
Friends, my name is Rachel Cheyney. I'm Trent Cheyney's oldest daughter. And while Mark and I were talking about this, putting this little video together for Dad's birthday, happy birthday, Dad, we decided that it needs a brief little introduction. So here I am with my notebook to go page after page of brief introduction. And I'm going to get through it as quickly as I can. And some of it may even be edited. Who knows? Okay. So let me start out by telling you about Dad's lineage. You may have heard of Cheyney, Pennsylvania. The name is spelled the same as ours, and that's where we come from. We come over from England via the Norman invasion. But to bring it more up to date, there was a Squire Thomas Cheyney, and so I guess Cheyney, Pennsylvania would be named after him. And he was involved in the Battle of Brandywine during the Revolutionary War. What happened was he was a Quaker. A lot of the folks down there in southern Pennsylvania were Quakers, and they were not supposed to take sides in the war. But Squire Cheyney did. He saw, when he was out working his fields one day, he saw the redcoats come marching. And he knew where George Washington's troops were. And he went and warned them. And they finally gave him access to George Washington himself. And at first, George Washington didn't believe him because they knew there were redcoat troops in another place. And what George Washington didn't know was that he was being flanked. So he eventually believed Squire Cheyney, and they fled, not without taking significant casualties. They basically lost the Battle of Brandywine, but many of them lived to fight another day. So they lost the battle, but won the war. As a result of that, of Squire Cheyney taking part, taking sides, he was shunned from his Quaker community, and he was not allowed to be buried in the Quaker burial grounds. And so Squire Cheyney said, well, fine, you can just bury me under my apple trees. And they did, and that later became known as the Cheyney Burying Grounds. Now, moving on to Dad's parents. They were both poets. We have Edward Ralph Cheyney, although he went by Ralph, and we had Lucia Trent, the daughter of William Peterfield Trent. Both of them were activist poets and what was called poets of the people. So once again, we can just track the genetic factors which created Dad. Okay, so he was raised in San Antonio, and he attended the university in San Marcos, which has gone through several names. Back when Dad went to school in the late 40s, it was a teacher's college. And he met his first wife there, my mother, Patricia Cavett Bolin was her maiden name. And they met in the debate club, which I think is very ironic. He got a bachelor's of science in English, and he was the student body president. And he went on a track scholarship, and he was in a whole lot of clubs and activities. You may see him as a college student. And if you can't tell who he is, he's the man who's smiling. He always has a smile on his face. Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. That was Dad's favorite poem. your attention.